And we're back to the Constitution line by line. And we're still plowing our way through the First Amendment to the United States Constitution because we barely got it written and the ink dried before people wanted to amend it.
Yeah. I'm just curious. After the amendments were written, freedom of speech, freedom of press, First Amendment.
All that Bill of Rights stuff.
And then the Alien and Sedition Act. How did that play into it? I just have to bring this up.
Oh, it's going to, yeah, I mean.
You're the historian here.
Exactly.
So we have freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and within 10 years of it being implemented, there's John Adams saying, hey.
If you say something bad about the government, you may be spreading sedition.
Yeah.
And the Alien and Sedition Acts are struck down. So.
Okay. They should have been.
Yeah, and they should have been. But that was the first real push on these Bill of Rights.
Okay.
So that begs the question, should we have had a Bill of Rights or not had a Bill of Rights? Because if we didn't have a Bill of Rights, then it would have been, well, the president doesn't have jurisdiction to talk about alien and sedition, except maybe he did if we go back and read the original Constitution.
Yeah, where the president had a lot of jurisdiction. The national government had a lot of jurisdiction.
Yeah, and they could do a lot of talking about things. They did do a lot of talking about what constituted treason and things like that.
Yeah. It's just so interesting that one of the people who worked on the development of the Constitution, John Adams, then as president, was willing to rip away part of it.
Well, because he didn't trust the average American. John Adams was having a hard time with all people are created equally.
Yeah.
He was having a hard time with that. They may have been created all equally, but not nearly as equal as they think they are.
Yeah. Now, John Adams is really one of the leaders in the development of political parties.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And it's political parties that can mark their freedom back to what we're about to talk about, which is freedom of assembly.
Absolutely.
So, I was thinking of a way to talk about Alien and Sedition Act.
Yeah, I mean, because you have the right to gather and talk about things that may be in opposition to government policy.
Yeah, yeah.
And that comes from this.
Yeah, so.
What's our line?
Congress shall make no law, and now how do I say this? Abridging the freedom, or more correctly, abridging the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So Congress shall make no law abridging the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So basically, in a simple way, people can get together and complain about the government.
And it's amazing. We take that for granted.
We do.
But it is rare worldwide. I mean, if you watch the news and if you watch some tin-horn dictator busting the chops of his people, the first thing they'll do is turn the fire hoses and the dogs and the police batons and the rubber bullets on any protest march, any gathering that they didn't approve. They don't like it when people clump up.
And they also work to squelch methods of communication.
Oh, yeah, they'll cut off the Twitter feed, cut off the Facebook.
Exactly.
Because that's now assembly.
Right.
Just virtual assembly.
Yeah, it's a social media assembly. And it's a way to say you can't complain. And
correct.
When you think about it, and the older I get, the more impressed I am with this part of the Constitution. The Constitution gives us the right to complain.
Yeah, we can grouse all we want.
Yeah.
But this has been a nation of grousers since the first person stepped on the shore.
We're a bunch of whiters.
Yeah, they left the old country because they didn't like it and they had no way to redress grievances. So
now we do.
We're going to vote with our feet. And so instead of voting with our feet, hey, get together with your pals down to Starbucks, bring your posters, bring your Sharpies, make your signs, go make your protest.
Yes.
It's interesting. I teach a history of Mexico course, and it's always interesting to compare and contrast the development of Mexico to the development of the U.S. because they're contemporaries, two republics on the North American continent. And in Mexico, you could not assemble.
Really?
And
That was prohibited.
The Spanish broke up any sort of group that was assembling. So they assembled under the guise of book clubs.
Oh.
So they had little coffee clutches, and they would talk about the books that they were reading.
Let's discuss Plato's Republic.
Yeah, and what they're doing is they're speaking about political theory. And the royalists are going, you can't have book clubs. And so then, after the overthrow of the Spanish, the Mexican central government, the centralists, didn't like assembly. Mm-hmm. So a lot of times what happened was Masonic lodge meetings became the places where assemblies were held, because you have all the secret rituals and the sort of privilege of being behind closed doors. And so one group ended up being York Rite Masons, and then their opposition were the Scottish Rite Masons, and they're meeting at different lodges in different parts of town, and those lodges ended up becoming cover for their need to assemble.
Right, their political.
Whereas in the United States, assemble all you want. Just do it peaceably.
Okay, now, yes, that's the idea, assemble all you want. Does that always happen? And you think about the history of the United States, you think about strike breaking that's taken place.
Oh, yeah.
You think about police going and
it's
whacking
the peaceably
people.
assemble.
It's the peaceably assemble. But what you also have to deal with is that the government isn't happy sometimes when people protest.
Well, they don't have to be happy. Sometimes the government needs to be sad.
Okay, I agree with you, but sometimes the government uses its power to suppress this assembly and this complaining.
I think that the pivot, though, is the peaceably assemble.
Okay. But government can mess with you. Okay?
And provoke you.
Yes.
To where you are no longer peaceable.
Okay. But even before that, can the government make your life difficult? If you want to get together with others. Yes, exactly.
Absolutely. If you're the American Communist Party and you want to get together at Starbucks and have your meeting.
They might have issues with that.
Yeah.
Now,
they might even send somebody down to the meeting.
Okay, now but the problem is you're talking about going to Starbucks. That's a private place. They have their own rules, whatever. So instead, let's say you and I want to form an organization. We just want to complain about the city of Abilene.
Okay.
We don't have enough sun or something. I don't know. Whatever we're going to complain about.
Sun. We got too much sun.
We got too much sun here. Too much water. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, we want to complain. So we want to get together with a couple of our friends and have a protest. Because if we complain privately, who cares?
Who cares? That's why Facebook was made.
Yeah. So we go to the police department. We ask for
a permit
to protest. And actually here in the city of Abilene, you get a permit. And there's a couple places that are basically designated as public places to protest. In downtown at the county courthouse, there's places there. Those are the normal things. And we say that we want to protest because we want to bring attention to our cause. We're going to protest at 8 o'clock in the morning at the county courthouse.
Okay.
And the police say, no, you can't do that. Can they do that? And the answer is yes, because 8 o'clock in the morning is when people arrive for work, people arrive for jury duty. The place is really busy. And it would really hinder the courthouse's ability to do its job.
So they're not prohibiting you from peaceable assembly. They're prohibiting you from peaceably assembling at 8 o'clock.
Exactly. So they come back to us and they say, okay, gentlemen, 8 o'clock's not a good time. But there's plenty of time at 2 in the morning. You go ahead and protest all you want. Here's your permit. Can they do that?
I would say probably so.
They can, but then we would say that's not reasonable.
So we would sue them.
We would simply complain about it.
Sure.
If they didn't back off, we would sue them, and the law is on our side. They have to be reasonable. So instead of an 8 o'clock protest, a 10 o'clock protest when everybody's already at work would be acceptable. A 12 noon protest.
But we can't throw rocks at their windows.
We cannot throw rocks at their windows. We've got to be peaceable. So
did you know I was trained as a strike breaker?
No.
Yeah, it's fine.
Gone.
Yes, I was.
In between being a journalist and a history professor?
I did a couple of years at
breaking strikes?
in the defense industry.
Yeah.
And I was clearly underfoot. And so they sent me to all sorts of training. And one of the training things I went to was how to be a strike observer.
Really?
Yeah. And so they were going to put me kind of in a deer blind up on top of the factory roof. And I was supposed to surveil the strikers to make sure that they weren't doing anything that was unpeaceable.
Okay.
And just become a source of intelligence for local law enforcement and for management. But one of the things that they said that I needed to be trained for is how to avoid being struck by ball bearings shot from slingshots. Because this particular union had access to lots of ball bearings, and they would go down to the sporting goods store and get what's called a wrist rocket, just one of those wrist slingshots, and shoot those at the observers.
How do you avoid those?
You duck. You duck behind the plexiglass and hope you don't get struck by a ball bearing. Now, that particular union did not strike. All was well, but I was trained on surveillance methods.
Okay.
So,
wow,
that's all about peaceably assembling.
It is.
And I had to rat them out if they got violent.
Yeah. Now, were they on the company's property?
They were outside the main gates is where they were going
So
to
they were on
protest.
public property?
Correct.
Okay. So, and therefore, get a permit.
Yeah.
Not a big deal. They're on public property.
Wave your signs.
And as long as they aren't interfering with people's ability to enter or exit.
Yeah, they could shake their signs at them, but they
Yeah.
couldn't touch their cars. They couldn't do anything. That's what I was being trained to observe.
Okay.
Did they get in front of that guy's Volkswagen as he tried to come to work?
Okay. And just since we're confessing things.
Yes.
I've been on the opposite side.
Oh, you've been a strike agitator.
No, I haven't been a strike agitator, but I've participated in civil obedience, civil disobedience protests against nuclear weapons. Way back in the wild 1980s.
Back when you had hair.
Yeah, back when
Long,
I had hair
flowing
and
hair.
a beard, too. And what we were trained to do, because we didn't want to break the law.
Yeah, because somebody like me would rat you out.
We would be at the Nevada Desert Test Site, which is outside of Las Vegas, and we would go and we would protest the testing of nuclear weapons at that site. And people would come to work via bus from Las Vegas.
Sure.
And so we would stand outside, not preventing them from coming or going.
But shaking your signs
but
at them.
shaking our signs. And, of course, it was a peaceful protest, so we would also be praying. Okay? And then if someone was going to take the next step and get arrested, we would go over and talk to the sheriff's deputies who were watching the whole thing. And we'd say, okay, that guy over there is going to go get arrested. And so we're going to wait till all the buses go by, and then he's going to stand in the middle of the street and then take a step onto government property, and then he's willing to be arrested. So we would negotiate it out in advance.
Wow.
Highly symbolic,
Yeah.
but very, very peaceable. And
Were you ever downrange from any of these tests? I'm starting to wonder.
well, I wonder about you.
Was there a breeze coming by? Yeah, how many times did I get hit in the head with a
Wonder
wrist
about you,
rocket? Yeah,
too.
the ball bearing.
So there we go. You have
Both sides of the coin.
There you go. So we have the right to complain, and there's different ways to complain. And as long as we don't prohibit people from going about their daily activities. And by the way, that was an issue, for example, you look at some of the big protests that take place in the United States today.
Sure.
You also think about the abortion clinic protests where they prohibited people from going into abortion clinics, that sort of thing.
The Women's March where they went down the streets of D.C. was great until they started throwing rocks through windows.
Yeah. So you've got to allow people to continue what they want to do.
And not do material damage.
And
the reason the federal government busted so many strikes in the late 19th century is oftentimes the strikers would take over the mines, take over the factories.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was essentially stepping over the line.
Yeah. So I think it's a really important freedom that we have. And, this leads to something that we haven't really talked about before with the First Amendment. And here we are at the end of it. And that's government regulating your content. Okay? So let's say, and this is a real case that happened, Skokie, Illinois, home of many Holocaust survivors. The American Nazi Party went there to protest the idea that the Holocaust actually actually existed.
Oh, really?
They were denying the Holocaust in the city where Holocaust survivors actually lived.
That's provocative.
That's very, very provocative. So the local government, simply refused to let them have
Just
a
no
protest.
permit, yeah.
Yeah, we're not going to give you a protest because we disagree with the content of what you're saying. And the American Nazi Party ended up taking that case before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ordered that the march be held.
Wow.
And then what happened is, there was a few American Nazis who marched, and tens of thousands of people
And that
who protested against them.
Reminds me of Charlottesville.
Oh, yeah.
And then also brings to mind people just kind of freelancing to deface statues or tear them down.
Yeah.
That is not peaceable assembly.
Right. So, complain all you want. We've got that right.
But
guaranteed in the Constitution.
But do it in the right way.
Yeah, do it in a peaceful way. Okay? The government calls it ingress and egress.
Yeah.
Okay? Let people come into work. Let them go out. They still have their freedom of movement.
Don't break stuff.
Don't break stuff.
Don't damage private or public
Don't
property.
hurt people. Complain all you want.
Yeah.
Okay?
Easy enough.
Yeah, First
I've got
Amendment.
that firm in my head.
Yeah.
So that's our line.
That's our line.
And we're going to pick up the last part of the First Amendment next time, correct?
No, we're done with the First Amendment.
First Amendment's done.
We're done. We're done.
True. I just knew there was another layer. Great.
No.
So we're done with the First Amendment.
So we're going the second next?
We're going to the
Oh,
Second
my.
Amendment next time. See you then.